Alrighty, so here we go. We are going to do a quick preview of the weekend's action. This is, of course, the last weekend's action before we have the Gold Cup, right? Before we get 10 days before the next MLS game that is going to happen. And one thing I also want to say is that I'm actually going to be out of town on Saturday, and I'll be back on Sunday. And I'm actually going to be going to the USA versus Trinidad and Tobago Gold Cup game. So expect me to do a quick recap of that game after the game is over. I might even do a review of that game as well, since I'm basically attending live in person. But yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about that game because with the way that the US have not been playing relatively well, and with the way that, most likely the team that's going to be playing against Trinidad and Tobago are going to be almost the same team that just got absolutely smacked by Switzerland a couple of days ago. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the team will respond. I mean, there has to be a response. I think it is pretty clear that if the U.S. does lose to Trinidad and Tobago in that opening game of the group stage in the Gold Cup, the panic button is going to be at an all-time high in terms of being smashed, and the doomers of the U.S. men's national team fan base is going to be in full force once again if it wasn't already. But that being said, looking at these weekends' action, and we technically already had two games that finished in terms of these match week. We saw one earlier tonight where the Quakes and the Timbers played to a 1-1 draw, and then we saw yesterday where NYCFC were able to win 4-0 against Atlanta United. But we do have one matinee game on Saturday, and by the way, all these games are going to be taking place on Saturday. There's no Sunday game this week, but the first matinee game will be St. Louis versus the LA Galaxy, which starts at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. St. Louis, of course, free 5-9, whereas the Galaxy, they still only have that low win, one win, four draw, and 12 losses. But keep in mind that one win came in the last game as well, and they are definitely rested now coming into this match week and are looking to try to make it two in a row to start their hope to maybe a miraculous second half of the season. I mean, it can't get any worse than what we saw in the first half of the season. Surely they're gonna get more wins in the second half of the season, especially if Ricky Pooch might be able to be back in this team as soon as probably when we get to August and September. Now, in terms of head-to-head matchup, so far the Galaxies have not solved St. Louis. St. Louis have won both of both of the wins have come from either of these teams have come from St. Louis City. There's free draws between both of these teams. It's hard to believe the Galaxy is another team that have never beaten St. Louis City in terms of these five meetings, but we'll see whether or not if this could be the case to do so. And especially with St. Louis, they're playing much better ever since the firing over Olaf Melbourne. Not a big surprise because anytime when you have a new interim head coach, in this case with Dave Pritchley, you always get the new interim head coach boos. And while they did not get a result in the last game, I believe they lost their last game as well. I didn't think they played badly in the last game, and I think there's no doubt that they definitely have looked much better playing under Dave Pritchley than we have seen doing Olaf Malberg. I mean, it's not easy to see because, one of the reasons why Olaf Malberg found himself out of the job after just 15 games is because of this boring brand of soccer that he's been playing. Although I will say that even though he was playing that boring brand of soccer, one of the more exciting resort that St. Louis got this season was against the LA Galaxy earlier this season with the 3-0 win. So the Galaxy will love to have some revenge, especially coming off of a win, which is something that they have not experienced at all this season, coming off of a win and finally them ending the curse at 16 games without a win to start the season. Now, moving on, we got the Philadelphia Union versus Charlotte FC. Now, in the beginning of the season, and I'm pretty sure near the beginning of the first couple of weeks of the season, everybody would have circled this matchup as being a marquee matchup in the Eastern Conference, and in some way, it could still be a marquee matchup. In fact, this could maybe be a preview of a first round matchup. Consider where each of these teams are in the standings. But yeah, for sure, they kind of have fall apart a little bit ever since they got off to a hot start. That can't be said about the Union this season. They're still in first place with 10-4-3 record, whereas Charlotte is 8-1-8. And I say that Charlotte has kind of fallen apart. They have definitely done a little bit better in the last couple of games, but they had a stretch where they lost like six in a row and really dropped themselves from being one of the top team in the Eastern Conference to now just fighting out to trying to stay above the red line right now. This is the first of three games that starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. A lot of games this match week is going to be taking place at 8:30 window. Definitely more than I usually get. But in terms of the head-to-head matchup, 3-2 in favor of the Philadelphia Union. So this should be a fun game. And again, this could be a matchup we could see in the playoffs in the near future. So a good playoff preview in terms of both of these teams facing off against each other. Now, moving on, we got New England versus FC Cincinnati. So, despite the fact that New England actually found themselves below the red line, despite the fact that they have definitely played so well in these last couple of games, that I'm kind of surprised that they're below the red line when you realize that they only played 15 games this season and they played by far the fewest amount of games that any MLS team has. So, they're going to have their chances in terms of the games in hand to catch up to the rest of the pack. Now, they're facing against a Cincinnati side that, yeah, this Cincinnati side has really struggled in the last couple of games. 9-3-5 it is the record, and really the struggle all started when Nick Hacklin went down with an injury. Ever since he went down with that injury, that backline has not looked the same, and it just feels like it's kind of deja vu all over again for Pat Nolan's side, like last season, where as soon as their star defender goes down, the dominoes started to go down on them, and it's not gonna be easy now that they're facing it's a New England team that still are playing with a lot of confidence. Now, in terms of the head-to-head, 6-3-3 in favor of the New England Revolution. And, again, yes, they have played the fewest amount of game, and yes, they do have those games in hand, but Caleb Porter is not going to just sit there and think that those games in hand that they can use will be a way to get themselves above the red line. He wants to win games, and he wants to keep up with the pack, and especially if they can go above the red line and they have those games in hand, then all of a sudden there could be a case where they could not only catch up to the rest of the pack, but really rise themselves in the standings because with them having a couple of games in hand, that could easily be 6 points that they could make up for the rest of the pack. And 6 points goes a long way in terms of you making the playoffs and not making the playoffs this season, as it seems like New England is going to be in the mix in terms of them being one of those bubble teams that is battling for the last couple of spot of the playoffs. Now, moving on, we got Columbus versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. So it's hard to believe, but we actually have a lot more interconference matchup than we usually see. So this is an interconference matchup. This is an interconference matchup. This is an interconference matchup, and then the late start, both of them are interconference matchup. So 5 of the 11 games this week is going to be interconference matchup in terms of the weekend. That is probably the most we have got in terms of the weekend's action. But in this interconference matchup, I mean, I don't want to say this is a preview of MLS Cup because this will be crazy if this is actually going to be an MLS Cup matchup between the Columbus Crew and the Vancouver Whitecaps. But hey, both of these teams are a really good team. Though I will say for the Columbus Crew, they have definitely fallen they're through a hard time lately under Wilfred Nancy. They've been going on this really long winless run, which is something that's kind of flying under the radar of the fact that they're actually winless, despite the fact that they don't really play like they're winless. They're still playing well, but they're just not getting the result that they need. And also, not to mention them drawing a lot of games so far this season. They've drawn 7 times this season, which I think that's the most that anybody has drawn so far this year. They only lost 3 times this season and got 7 wins, whereas for Vancouver, 10-5-1 is the record. And if there was any doubt that the Whitecaps were not going to recover after that 5-0 beatdown that they suffered against Cruz Azul in the final, well, that Seattle resort just kind of proved that, yeah, Jasper Sorensen's side is not a fluke this season, especially in league play. This is a team that has show mental fortitude like we have never seen before an MLS team do. Like if they lose to Seattle in that game, and especially of how shorthanded the Whitecaps are in that one, and they might still be shorthanded in this game because coming out of the June international break, we'll see whether or not some of these teams might be only able to play some of their players that were going on international duty for a short amount of period because some of those players definitely played a lot of minutes for their national team and they're not going to be completely rested coming into this weekend as well. But if you want to question the mental fortitude of the Vancouver Whitecaps, I mean, you can definitely question that if they lose that game against the Sounders. But yeah, this team again, and besides that one bad loss that they had, and it just kind of sucks that they performed the worst that they had this season, and probably one of the worst games the Whitecaps have played in a big final like that. Well, so far in league play, this team has been an absolute wagon. You just cannot stop the Vancouver Whitecaps, even if they're shorthanded, and I'm pretty sure Columbus will realize that too, especially if they're not playing relatively well. I mean, if there is one time where you want to play against the Columbus Crew, this is probably the time to do so. Though again, if you're a Columbus, this is probably not the best time to play against the Vancouver Whitecaps because again, this team must have had a lot of confidence knowing that hey, even the backup squad can be able to beat some of the better team in MLS, and Seattle definitely found out the hard way in terms of the last weekend's match. Now, moving on to the first of five game that starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. These are, of course, the Central Time game. We will have Minnesota versus San Diego FC. So this will be probably one of the more marquee matchup. In fact, I think out of all these matchups that we see, this is probably the matchup that has the highest points total between both of these teams. It's second versus third. Well, theoretically, it's a battle between two teams that are tied at second place. Both Minnesota and San Diego are currently tied at second place. San Diego has the advantage because of wins, but for Minnesota, they have an 8-6-3 record, while San Diego has a 9-3-5 record. This, of course, is the first ever meeting between both of these teams. And keep in mind, for Minnesota, they're in the midst of this really tough schedule that they're in right now. We talked about before this murderous road that they had to encounter before the Vancouver game where they have to play Vancouver, Seattle, and now have to play against San Diego FC. And so far, doing this murderous road, I am really shocked. The fact that they've have 4 points out of this murderous road. Like out of these three games, if they can get 4 points, I would be happy. The fact that they've already got it, and there's a chance that they could get some more. Who knows who knows if this is gonna be be something that I definitely did not expect them to do so well, and then maybe even right now really sending the message to the rest of the Western Conference that they are definitely a contender in the West. And this is also a matchup that I've been waiting to see for a while, knowing that in some way, as much as I know San Diego is a tough team to play both home or on the road, this is a team that I think can play right into the wheelhouse of Minnesota. Minnesota this season has always do well whenever they face against a team that likes to have the ball and like to control the ball. San Diego is a prime example of that, and I think this could be a game where, again, I know San Diego is not going to shade away from their identity. I know Mikey Vera's team is still going to have most of the ball and have most of the possession, but this is where again, I feel like nowadays with teams that likes to have the ball when they face against Minnesota, they got to be worried that yeah, you want to play your game, but at the same time, you got to remember you're playing right into the hands of Minnesota United as well, because this is by far the best team when it comes to not having the ball and the best team in terms of the transition, and not to mention probably one of the best team in terms of set pieces as well. So yeah, this is a very fascinating matchup, and this is just as fascinating as a matchup that I would say when Minnesota play against Miami, and that was a game where I was confident that they can get a win because that game feels like it can play right into the hands of Minnesota, and this feels like it's kind of the same thing. Now, I will say that San Diego does have a bit more faster defender on this team that can recover from transitional compared to what we see in the Miami game. But still, this feels like it's a game where if San Diego does decide to play their usual game of possession, it could be a huge advantage for this Minnesota team because that's kind of the game that they like to play. That's the Ramsey ball that we've seen throughout this season. Now, moving on, we got Sporting KC versus FC Dallas. So Sporting KC 4-4-9 is record, whereas Dallas is 4-6-6. And in terms of the head-to-head meetings, 16-6-16 between both of these teams. So it's been pretty dead even when it comes to the head-to-head meeting. And I also wouldn't be surprised. This might be a game that feature a lot of goals. Both of these teams likes to attack, and especially the fact that it feels like this season every Dallas road game has to feature some high scoring game, and with the way that Sporting KC has been also very very good when it comes to scoring this season. Again, I would not be surprised if there is a game you want entertainment and you want goals and you want crazy action. This is probably the game to do so because there's definitely a sense that that could be the case, and then watch how that's not going to be the case. I mean, surely it has to be. It's a golden rule of Dallas game this season where when they're playing at home, it's going to be a low scoring game, but when they're playing on the road for whatever reason, Peter Cole's side likes to open things up, and next one the game could end 3-3 or even for free in terms of how it end, and I feel like it could be one of those kind of game as well. Now, moving on, we got the Houston Dynamo versus Montreal. So this is another one of those interconference matchup. Houston 5-5-7, whereas Montreal with a dismal 1-5-11 record. Now, in terms of head-to-head meeting, 8 wins apiece for both of these teams and 2 draw. And this is kind of one of those games where, for the Dynamo, I know they want to bounce back after a tough resort that they have last time, and that this is gonna be a game where they are expected to win, especially with the way that Ben Olsen's side has played much better lately, and you're facing against a Montreal side that we talk about bad teams right now in MLS. I mean, you could say that the Galaxy might be the one of the worst team with the way that they have almost the same record as Montreal, but I think Montreal right now is right now the worst team in MLS right now because while the Galaxy have been unlucky in terms of some of the resort, there hasn't been anything unlucky about Montreal this season. I mean, their resort has been brutal to watch. There's some games where it's almost tough to watch how they've been playing, and I even mentioned how dysfunctional this team is. So yeah, this is an opportunity for the Dynamo to capitalize it, especially them playing at home. For the most part, they've been okay this season at home. Not as good as you would hope that they should be at home. But against a one-win team like Montreal, surely you got to say Ben Olsen's side's got to capitalize on this opportunity to get themselves even closer in terms of getting above the red line right now. Now, moving on, we got Chicago versus Nashville SC, and besides the Minnesota and San Diego game, I think this is also another matchup that could have some popcorn kind of material. And even though when you look at the standing, they're not anywhere close to each other. Chicago is actually not uh, uh, pretty low in the standings, but they definitely don't play like they're just above the red line right now. I mean, Greg Berhalter has got this team firing on all cylinder, and they must be feeling absolutely confident after that 7-1 beatdown that they gave to DC United. Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure in this game it's not going to be anything like that. In fact, I also would say that this probably is not going to be 7-2 in favor of Nashville SC. Remember last time when both of these teams face off against each other, it was Nashville the one that gave Chicago a spanking after scoring 7 goals against them, and this is why for the Chicago Fire, this has been just such a weird season for them. Of all the weird season that the Chicago Fire has had, this is probably the weirdest and craziest season where I don't think there's ever been a MLS team that gone through a same season where they score 7 goals but also concede 7 goals in an MLS game. But there's a chance where they can definitely get some revenge against Nashville in this one. One thing I will say about Chicago that they definitely need to be better is their home form. Well, their road form has been absolutely excellent, which is kind of crazy to see because for a while it's always been whenever the Fire players on the road, it's always an automatic L for them. But this season it's been the complete opposite. It's the home form that they need to improve at Soldier Field. So we'll see whether they could do so, especially against a red hot Nashville team. Still one of the hottest team right now in the league. And by the way, in terms of the head-to-head meeting, yeah, it hasn't really been favoring Chicago in terms of head-to-head meeting. Nashville has won 5 of the meeting and have a 5-2-1 record over the Chicago Fire. Now, moving on, we got Austin FC versus the New York Red Bulls. So Austin, they're coming off of a much-needed win in their game against the Colorado Rapids with a 6-5-7 record, whereas the Red Bulls have an 8-3-6 record. Head-to-head meeting 0-1-1 is the record. Now, this might be a matchup where, yeah, because it's an Austin game, you're not going to be expecting a lot of entertainment. A lot of their games this season has been low scoring, and the Red Bulls this season, yes, they have been able to at times find some scoring, but when they do face against a rigid defense like the one that Los Verdes can provide, yeah, do not be surprised that while I mentioned the Sporting KC and Dallas game might be popcorn material, this might not be one. This might be a low scoring kind of log type of game where yeah, if you don't like defense and if you don't like low scoring chances or not a lot of action, this probably might not be the game for you. And now watch how this will be the complete opposite, and this will be just an absolute firework show between these two teams. Now, moving on into the last two games, the late start game, and I can't believe saying 9:30 p.m. Eastern time is a late game because this week we don't have any games that starts at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. I think this is the first time this weekend's action where we don't actually have a late West Coast game. But in terms of the first 9:30 p.m. kickoff start, we got Real Salt Lake versus DC United. So I would say this is kind of the desperation derby for both of these teams. Both of these teams desperately need a win. I mean, for RSL, it's been just a miserable season. 4-3-10 is their record. It just feels like it's gotten worse and worse every single week, especially on the goal scoring department. Whereas for DC United, I mean, I don't need to say much about what happened last weekend that DC had. I mean, that was equally one of the worst games that DC United has ever played in their franchise history against the Fire, especially at home. Getting thumped 7-1 like that, they desperately want to get a response. And again, playing against another team that is struggling, this is an opportunity to get that win with a 4-6-8 record. Now, in terms of the all-time meeting, 6-3-4 in favor of RSL, and whenever it's a desperation derby, you know that both of these teams desperately need 3 points. A draw is not going to help the cause for both of these teams. I mean, a draw will just continue the misery that both of these teams have in terms of the winless run. So, yeah, let's see who, of course, will get that crucial win in this desperation derby. And then last but not least, we got the Colorado Rapids versus Orlando City. Again, this pretty much is another interconference matchup. It's the fifth interconference matchup that I'm talking about from this weekend's action. The Rapids 6-4-7 and has been very mediocre this season. Whereas for Orlando City, they have a 7-6-4 record, and it's been a very frustrating 7-6-4 record for Orlando City as well, because you know this team can be better than what their record is. I mean, the way that they play, they have played some entertaining brand of soccer under Oscar Pereira, but then there's some very frustrating games at times. In many ways, I would say that this is kind of the inconsistent derby, because I think this is kind of a game between two teams that are kind of in a similar situation where you know they can play that entertaining brand of soccer. You know they could be better than what their record says, but because of the fact that there's just some games where they just haven't been at their best or perform at their usual, that's kind of where they are in the standings for both of these teams in their respective conference. So we'll see who, of course, will actually show their potential in this game. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 5-2 in favor of Orlando City, and this is the other game that starts at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Well, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview for this weekend's action. Again, this is the last weekend's action we're gonna get before we get to the Gold Cup and Club World Cup break, and we're not going to have an MLS action until the end of June, and we might also not have a couple of MLS games during that part too, depending on if one of these team in the Club World Cup could make it into the next round, make it to the knockout stage, which is definitely very highly unlikely, consider when you look at the groups that these teams are in. They are definitely in some really tough group, and MLS team hasn't really fared well when it comes to playing in the international stage. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.